A common frustration in marking in Brightspace is around the lack of visibility over marker progress and grade distribution during marking itself with our assessments. So whilst we have a tool, the grade moderation tool, which is available to markers once all marking is complete and generally involves hiding of both submission portals and gradebook columns, during the marking process itself, it is very, very difficult to get the information from the assignment dashboards on how marking is progressing in terms of scores and also marker progress. So for example, if I open up this assignment dashboard, we can see here we have a very large nursing subject here with hundreds of submissions coming in, and I can see in the evaluated column that 102 papers have been marked. Now potentially the subject convener at this point, knowing that marking is going on, may want to be checking in to see which markers are on top of things, which ones might need a follow-up, and they're also probably interested in how those scores are going through that process because they might be looking at the outliers, HDs, fails, etc. Well, that process can begin potentially once marking commences, except I have no access to any of that information from here. So for example, if I open up the submission dashboard, what I'm getting here is a timestamp against submissions for the students. These are papers that haven't been marked yet. And if I want to get some visibility on the marking that has happened so far, well, I've got a couple of options. One of them is to go into search options, change what I'm looking for to from showing everyone to showing those that have been graded but unpublished, and then selecting this magnifying glass. And that will give me a view if I scroll down on those that have been draft saved. But you can see that I'm not seeing any other information here. I don't know when it was marked, for example. This is the student submission timestamp. Has nothing to do with the marker. I can't see what the scores are on any of these unless I open them all up individually. Now you just saw that there were 600 papers in here, so I don't know that I'm going to be doing that as a part of this progress check. However, what I'm going to show you is that if you have two things in place in your subject, specifically marking teams using the groups tool, which we'll have a look at, and also a properly set up rubric, then you will be able to use a tool in Brightspace to check your marker progress. So I'm going to show you through how to use the Rubric Statistics Tool to do exactly that. So I mentioned those two elements. The first one being marking teams created in the groups tool. So let's have a look under communication groups. That's one way to get to the groups tool. What we're looking for here is a type of group setup to gather marker information. So they've got one here called marking teams. Let's have a look at what that looks like. Remembering that we had 600 students in this subject. So they have in fact created a type of group setup where it has split the cohort automatically into blocks of 20, and then they've allocated either one or more of those marking blocks to different markers based on their capacity. So I can see here, for example, JS has got 60 students. There will be other markers that have less than that. So for example, I can see FN has 40. Then there'll be others in here that have less again. LG has 20. So this will allow you to cater to the different capacities of your markers without having to wait to find out which marker has which capacity or putting particular students into groups. They've split the cohort up automatically, and then they've distributed those groups to particular markers. So we have our marking teams set up using the groups tool, and that will mean that we're able to filter when we're in at both our markers. Will be able to go into their assignment dashboard and sort their views by their groups. So for example, if I open this up, the markers can come in and use view by groups and hit apply, and then find the correct group. There are a lot of groups in this subject, but let's find our marking teams. And for example, if I was JS, I would be able to say, right, I'm going to look at my first block of 20, hit apply, and these are the student papers that I need to be marking. There'll be 20 in there for me. So that properly set up marking teams using the groups tool firstly allows your markers to filter their views regardless of the size of the cohort. And the second part of our solution for today is to set up a rubric so that we can use rubric statistics to check marker progress. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So if we go into the rubrics tool, subject admin rubrics, here's the rubric that's being used to grade that task, and it is locked because we've got submissions coming in. It is a custom points rubric, which means it's going to tally scores. Let's have a look at what it looks like. I'm probably not going to be able to edit it, but let's preview it. And we can see here we've got a number of criterion down the left, HD through fail, we've got points allocated for marking, and then a set number of points down the right hand side. So 20, 20, 20, a couple of 10s means that they are marking out of 100. But the most important part of setting a rubric up properly to use the rubric statistics tool is to make sure that this overall score area down the bottom of the rubric has been set up properly. What I mean by that is you need to have put in what each of the scores out of whatever total your rubric is out of and what that equates to score-wise down the bottom. So when you actually create a rubric to begin with, you're probably already aware this is what a blank rubric will look like in this area. It's got these levels in place. So firstly, you would need additional columns, and then you're going to need to actually configure this to put in what it actually represents. So sort of your HD through fail continuum, and then you need to know how many points in the rubric equate to a HD. So it's, keep in mind it's or more. So it's not the max, it's the bottom of that criterion scale for the overall mark in the rubric. So you do have to make sure that that part is set up and that you haven't either deleted these columns or just left them blank, because level 1 through 4 means nothing. So we need to make sure that that is set up properly, and that certainly has been done in the case of this rubric, as I showed you before. There it is, HD through fail, so they've put in how many points. It is much easier when it's out of 100, obviously, because 85% is going to be 85 points, etc., etc. So make sure the overall score is populated. So that brings us back to being able to check marker progress and grade distribution with those marking teams in place and a properly set up rubric. If you have both of those things in place already, what you can do is come into the rubrics area, find the rubric that's being used for marking, and then hit the drop down and view statistics. This opens up rubric statistics for that one rubric. You'll notice the first tab it opens is called Activities. We don't use it. Similarly, we don't have access to the ePortfolio tool, so those two are useless to us at the moment, but what we're looking for is this second tab, Competency Activities. And the first lot of information that it will give us is a top-down summary on marking right now. Where is it up to? So what I can see here is that 84 of the assessments have had the rubric adjusted or marked. The average at this point across those 84 papers is a credit, and the average score is 66%. Remembering that that rubric was out of 100, so that makes sense. 66% is going to fit in there. If your rubric is out of something other than 100, then that score is going to look a little different. All right, that's a start. We get our top-down view of where the average score lies and how much marking has happened. If we click on this Actions button, it's going to give us access to a lot more information. The first thing it gives us is a better overall summary showing us the actual spread across each of the grades for this task. So at the moment, 30% of the students are getting a credit, for example. More are getting a pass, so on and so forth. So that's a start. Next, we can click on Criteria Statistics, and that's going to show us the spread against each criterion in the task. So what does the grade spread look like for criterion 1, 2, 3, etc. Probably going to see these fluctuate depending on which criterion are going to be more difficult for students, and some of them will be easier, etc. So this might be of value to you when you're reviewing the assessment, potentially for refinement for subsequent teaching sessions. But really the key information we're looking for to check marker progress is in this third tab, individual statistics. So if I click on that, what I'm getting at this point is a list of those 84 papers that have been marked, students down the left, grade that they've received, score on the rubric for what that equates to, and their markers, as well as a marker timestamp on the right hand side. So this isn't a submission timestamp, this is when the rubric was last marked by the markers. So we now have an indication on where markers are up to, a starting point. You're able to sort this by learner names, so ascending, descending, etc. So it's going to be alphabetized. We can't sort by level or by score, but we can sort by assessor, ascending, descending. So for example, at the moment, it's showing me S, P, M, so it's going descending. So I can see where my markers are up to at a glance. Depending on the size of your cohort, this may be more or less valuable to you, but I can see at this stage an initial view as well as those marker timestamps. But what I can do now is use my view by filter to bring those marking teams into play. So if I'm going to view by groups and hit apply, and I'd like to check on a particular group, so find our marking teams group, I'm going to check on, let's go with JS group number 1. How's that going? Okay, haven't done any of the marking there. Let's try a different marker. Let's try SB, for example, first group. And I can see that they've marked 3 there and when they've done it and what the scores are. So you can see that we now have a mechanism to check in on individual marker progress. We can see a top-down view of scores, either of the whole cohort or of marking teams. We also get a marker timestamp, which is great because this is all about information based on the rubric. It's not based on what's gone into the Brightspace assignment itself, it's what's gone into the rubric. So that's why it's so important to have the rubric set up correctly. The last filter that we can use is sections, which means if you do, and in some cases this happens, if you do have markers allocated based on cohorts of students, so a particular marker that might have been allocated to Albury internal, for example, or Bathurst distance, etc., then you can use a sections view also to filter. But the one that has the most value, given how we use marking teams and marking groups here, is to make sure that you have the rubric set up properly and you've set up marking teams inside your groups tool, because that's going to give you that filter to narrow it down to particular types of markers in your setup. So I hope that has some value to you. We'll see you again.